My name is Daniel, and what happened to me 3 years ago is something I've barely told anyone. Not because I'm afraid you won't believe me. Honestly, I don't care whether you do or not. I'm telling this because to this day, when I go to bed, I check the lock on my door 3 times. And the window. Always the window. It all started because I wanted to save money. I was 26, freshly divorced, and cash was tight. A realtor, an old family friend, offered me a house for a ridiculously low price. Out on the edge of town, along a road the locals called Hollow Creek Road, 2 stories, a sagging porch, but solid. The owners moved out a long time ago, he said. Just sign the papers, and it's basically yours for nothing. I didn't stop to ask why it was basically nothing. That was my first mistake. I moved in at the end of October. I remember it clearly because I spent the first night unpacking boxes to the sound of rain drumming on the roof, thinking that I finally had something of my own. The house smelled of old wood and dust, but otherwise seemed normal, ordinary, even cozy. The strangeness started on the third night. I woke up around 3 in the morning with the feeling that someone was in the room. You know that feeling, not a sound, not movement, just the sense of a presence pressing on the back of your neck. I lay there, afraid to move, staring into the darkness at the foot of the bed. And there, in the corner where the old wardrobe stood, it seemed like the shadow was a little too solid to just be a shadow. I turned on my phone, the flashlight lit up an empty corner, nothing. I chalked it up to nerves from the move and fell back asleep. The next evening, coming down to the kitchen, I noticed the basement door standing ajar. I distinctly remembered closing it. The realtor had warned me there was a draft down there and the floorboards were rotten, better not to go in. I shut the door again, turned the latch, and went to bed. Got in the morning. The latch was open. I started acting paranoid, checking every door before bed, counting my steps on the stairs, listening to every creak. After a week I'd almost convinced myself the house was just old and made noise as the temperature shifted. Almost. Then I found the journal, sorting through things in the upstairs closet. I found a hidden compartment behind a false panel in the back wall, a small nook, and inside it a worn leather-bound notebook. The entries were in a woman's handwriting, hurried, in places nearly illegible. The dates were from 1987. The first pages were an ordinary diary. A woman named Margot wrote about her husband, about renovating the house, about the neighbors. But somewhere around the middle, the tone changed. She wrote that she heard footsteps in the attic, even though the attic was locked from the outside, and she was the only one with the key. She wrote that her husband had started acting strange, forgetting entire days, talking to himself in the basement. Then came an entry that made my blood run cold. She wrote that he wasn't her husband anymore, that she knew it sounded insane, but his eyes weren't his eyes, that his smile was wrong, that the night before, he'd stood at the foot of the bed and just watched her, unblinking, and she'd pretended to be asleep for 2 hours until he finally went back downstairs. A few more entries followed, increasingly fragmented, and then the journal cut off abruptly. The last line read, "If someone finds this, don't go down to the basement after midnight. It waits for the house to be empty long enough." I think now it finally has been. I closed the notebook, and I'll admit, for the first time in a long while, I felt real, animal fear. But it was already late evening, rain hammering the roof, and it was a 40-minute drive to town on a washed-out road. I decided I'd leave in the morning, just get through this one night, then find a way to break the deal on this damn house. I locked the bedroom door with the old, rusty but functional latch, barricaded the door with a dresser, and lay down without turning off the lights. Sleep took me anyway. Around 1 in the morning, I was woken by a sound from downstairs, a quiet, rhythmic knocking, like someone was methodically climbing the stairs, stepping on every other tread. I'd lived in the house for 3 weeks by then and knew exactly which steps creaked. The sound was coming from precisely those steps. Whatever was making it knew exactly how to climb so the house would respond with that specific creak. As if on purpose, the knocking stopped right outside my door. Silence fell, so thick I could hear my own pulse in my ears. Then a quiet scrape of metal against metal. Someone was working the latch from the other side, slowly, hastily, as if there was no need to rush. I didn't make a sound. I lay there, gripping the blanket, watching the doorknob tremble almost imperceptibly. Then a voice spoke, a man's voice, low but wrong somehow in its timbre, as if it had been recorded and played back just slightly slower than it should be. "Margot," it said. "Let me in. I'm cold." My breath caught. Margot, the woman from the journal. Whoever was saying this couldn't have known that name unless he'd been here the whole time. All these 30-odd years. I didn't answer. The voice repeated the same phrase again and again, with the exact same intonation each time, like a broken record. Then the latch rattled loudly, as if struck hard, and everything went quiet. I didn't sleep again until dawn. As soon as light began to show through the window, I grabbed the essentials into a bag, not even bothering to change, and bolted down the stairs. But at the bottom, I stopped. The basement door was standing wide open, and from the darkness below came that same rhythmic knocking, as if something was climbing upward on an invisible staircase inside the walls. I didn't stay to find out what it was. I ran out through the kitchen, forgot about my car, forgot my phone charging in the bedroom. I just ran down the dirt road in the pre-dawn fog until I reached the highway and flagged down a ride into town. The police I called later searched the house. They found nothing, no signs of forced entry, no evidence anyone had lived there besides me. The basement turned out to be ordinary, cluttered, with no hidden door anywhere. They took Margot's journal as evidence, but the case was closed quickly for lack of any crime. I learned later, through a contact at the city archives, that in 1988, a man named Harold Whitlock had disappeared from that house. His wife, Margot, reported that he'd walked out one night and never came back. The case was never solved. 2 years later, Margot herself vanished under the same circumstances. Neighbors heard noise in the night, and by morning the house stood empty, the basement door thrown wide open. I never went back for my things. The house still stands on Hollow Creek Road. I checked on satellite maps. Someone else probably bought it just as cheap as I once did. Sometimes at night, especially when it's raining, I wake up and for a split second I hear that knocking, rhythmic, methodical, climbing an invisible staircase. And every time, it takes me a few seconds to remember. I'm not there anymore. I'm safe, but I still check the latch on my door 3 times every single night, just in case. Asterisk,